Moonlight Shadow, it's Nish with you, keeping you company until 6 o'clock. It's 6 now, and let's talk about parking fines, because parking can be one of those most stressful parts of a trip to shops. Finding change for machine, downloading apps to get a ticket online, and it's often all against the clock as well. Well, private parking firms have pledged to update their rules to ensure drivers aren't penalised if they don't pay to park within 5 minutes. It's all because Rosie Hudson was taken to court last year after racking up a fine of nearly £2,000 for taking more than 5 minutes to pay for parking.
When I went to pay through the online system, I couldn't access any signal. The only time I could get signal was once I was in the building where I worked. I got receipt, proof of payment to say, yes, you've paid for a full day's parking, 12 hours per day. They still seem to believe that because I haven't paid within that 5-minute grace period, I'm expected to pay a fine.
Well, in December, the parking company dropped its case against Rosie, but said the car park signage was clear about the 5-minute rule. Well, today the firm's been back in touch with the BBC to say it still disputes Rosie's version of events and says on one occasion she took 3 hours to pay for parking. The British Parking Association says it will revise the rules around payment difficulties by next month, and it's aiming to carry out a review of the private parking sector by April. Well, Scott Dixon is the complaints resolver, a consumer and motoring disputes expert, joins me on the show. Hiya, Scott. So talk to me about parking rules, because they can be quite confusing, can't it?
Well, if this private parking operator, they say they dispute Rosie's version of events. Well, why did they drop the case? They can't have it always. And this 5-minute rule should be abolished, Nish, because there is a 10-minute grace period within the new watered-down industry code of practice to give you time to read the terms and conditions of the signage and decide whether you want to enter into the contract or not. And this is simply a knee-jerk reaction to adverse media on Rosie's case. And we need a proper UK government code of practice with teeth, rather than having the industry marking its own homework and making the rules up as they go along.
The British Parking Association, Scott, says that it's going to revise the rules around payment difficulties by next month. What do you make of the review?
Well, I just think it's just ridiculous, I'll be honest with you. This 5-minute rule should be abolished because there's already a 10-minute grace and consideration period. And what the British Parking Association are saying is that's to give you time to leave the car park after you've vacated the parking space, but that's not strictly true. That's to give you time to read the terms and conditions of the signage to decide whether you want to park there or not, and to enter into the contract to park on private land. And it's important to stress that private parking operators cannot fine you. They issue invoices called parking charge notices for an alleged breach of contract for parking on private land. Only councils can fine you, and they issue penalty charge notices for infringements on public highways, like parking in bus lanes and on double yellow lines.
Yeah. And
with Rosie's case, she paid for every parking day she paid, and it took her a bit of time to comply because there was problems with the Wi-Fi signal, the meters were broken, and she found evidence on Google Street View to prove that. So, and these parking charge notices, a lot of them are issued more than 14 days after the parking event, and the one and only parking charge notice that Rosie paid was issued more than 14 days after the parking event, and that was in breach of Schedule 4 of the Protection of Frames Act 2012. So there was no keeper liability because it was issued late. Now, Rosie and nobody else would know that, and the private parking operator did, and they deliberately stripped out any reference to that legislation to trick Rosie into paying a parking charge notice that was invalid. And she put that to them, and they donated £60 to her chosen cancer charity as a result of my advice.
Right. Well, Scott, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you very much. That's Scott Dixon, aka the complaints resolver, a consumer and motoring disputes expert, talking about that particular case, actually. Rosie's case in particular. She was taken to court last year after racking up a fine of nearly £2,000 after taking more than 5 minutes to pay for parking. It can be really confusing, can't it? Sometimes you don't read the signage, he knew there was a 5-minute period of where you have to pay as well. If you've not got any change, I never carry change with me. And downloading an app as well, that in itself, if you've got weak signal and quite often signal it can be weak and you can't download it. It does happen, doesn't it? So there you have it.